finishing up the bird chapter. We're on 608, social behavior and reproduction. Birds, as we've already talked about, there's a lot of them, obviously. There's several different species, there's several different categories. We had put up Ray, Tite, and Carinate. We're going to look at a couple other categories here in a little bit. But this first topic, social behavior and reproduction, this is where they get the terminology birds of a feather flock together, because there's advantages to that. A lot of the advantages are mutual protection, huddling for cold weather, finding mates. It's a lot easier to pick one out of 100 than go off on a long search and try to find a single one out there somewhere. So there's tons of advantages of social behavior, and birds are probably one of the most social creatures out there. Flocks of starlings would be an example. Geese flying south for the winter, another example. So it says that land birds, with some conspicuous exceptions such as starlings and rooks, tend to be less gregarious than seabirds during breeding to seek isolation for rearing the brood. A lot of the seabirds are talking about, they'll nest in large groups. I mean, there'll just be tons of nests in a small area, and there'll just be seabirds hanging off cliffs everywhere. Where some of the land birds, like a starling, may run in a flock all winter long, but once they find their mate in spring and mating, those two go off on their own and may rear their young and then join back up with the flock in the next spring is what they're talking about. This togetherness offers advantages, which we listed: mutual protection from enemies. When you have good eyesight like birds do, and you have that many eyes together, they should see enemies coming. So definitely good protection. Ease in finding mates, less opportunity for individual straying during migration, and mass huddling protection against low night temperatures. Now that brings up another little topic with birds when it's talking about low night temperatures. Now we've already discussed the fact that birds spend a lot of their life finding food. We already discussed it's a high energy food that's probably seasonal. When it comes to nighttime, a lot of these smaller birds at night should be resting or roosting or sleeping, however you want to put that, when in essence they need food for energy just to maintain their metabolism through the several hours of the nighttime, from dark to daylight. So how do they make it if during daylight, when they're actually active, they must consume a certain amount of food to maintain livelihood? How do they make it through a cold night, not searching for food, and maybe no food in the crop? How do they make it? In theory, they should die, but they don't. Any ideas? Any thought processing today?
Store energy.
What?
Store energy on it.
They may have a little bit stored, and hopefully when they go to roost at night, they have some food in the crop itself that can be digested throughout the night to maintain energy levels. But literally what they do is go through what's called a daily torpor. And daily torpor is lowered metabolism below that of normal daily activity. And so they require less energy to rest through the night as they would to function during the day. And requiring less, we can last longer. So they literally lower metabolism, even in some cases lowering body temperature, not to a hibernation state, but just lowering all the qualifications necessary for daylight living to night living, where they don't need as much energy. So it's called daily torpor. Now, it says at no time are the highly organized social interactions of birds more evident than during the breeding season, as they establish territorial claims, and birds are the #1 most territorial animal out there. They are the most territorial. We're territorial, but birds are way territorial. You didn't know we was territorial, did you? Do you ever lock your house? You're territorial. Do you have a beware of dog sign on your fence and not even own a dog? You're territorial. Those are the worst dogs ever right there. The one you don't see coming. Now, if somebody's got this huge beware of dog sign, there's a little chihuahua on the other side of the fence, they think, yeah, right. But it's the one sleeping around the back, the one you better worry about. So if you don't see one, that's even worse, isn't it? Where's he coming from? How big is he? You know, all these questions going. we're territorial. Would it bother you if you were sitting in your house watching TV and you have your doors open, you're not locked up, and somebody's wanting to go from their house to the neighbor's house, and the closest path is going right smack through your living room? Would it bother you if they just used that as a path? It would tend to bother me. That makes us territorial. Birds, well, they'd walk by, we'd probably know them as a neighbor, and they'd walk through the house, and what are you doing? Well, this is the closest path, it's the straightest line to the neighbor's house, and I need to go over there. You know, next time, you might make a little detour, you know. The bird, he'd probably just jump right in the middle of him, we'd have us a big old fight right there. That's how territorial birds are. And, you know, and some humans, they'd just pull a gun out and shoot him. In Oklahoma law, they'd have a right to do so. So we're territorial, but birds are really territorial. So selecting mates, building nests, incubating, hatch their eggs, and rear their young. So the reproductive systems in birds, you have the male testes in non-breeding season are virtually vestigial, non-functional, and shrunk up to nothing. They don't need them. What they're using in the non-breeding season is whatever it takes to survive life, to find food, to stay warm, to detour away from predators, whatever it may be. But as day length starts increasing in December, when we start gradually increasing day length, the hormones start changing in the bird's body, which actually would promote them to migrate to their breeding grounds, whatever their summer breeding grounds would be. And by doing so, even fat deposition kicks in, food becomes more available, pituitary hormones kick in, so gonadotropins kick in, which the male bird testes now grows 300 times its average size in the non-breeding season. You think it's functional now? Absolutely. Now the female, she has two sides to her reproductive tract, as do most females do, but the bird, usually only one side will become functional. The other side stays vestigial and doesn't actually grow up to the normal size it should be. And they say it's usually the left ovary and oviduct that develops and becomes functional. The right side, they say, dwindles and stays or becomes vestigial. So a fertilized egg. Now, what kind of reproduction would you consider a bird to have? Is it oviparous, ovoviviparous, or viviparous? Would you agree we have egg production? External egg production. Would you agree we, in birds, would have internal fertilization? Okay. What kind is it? You got a 33 and a 30% chance of getting this right now.
One is not placental, but I don't know.
It's not placental. Very good. That takes out one of them, doesn't it? Which one's that take out of? Viviparous is out. Now we're down to oviviparous and oviparous. Oviviparous?
Yeah.
So which one do you think, Kelsey? Oviparous. And you say oviparous, why? Because it's egg live birth and can't be internal or external fertilization? Good thing I said that for you, huh? And that's what it is oviparous. The only difference in a bird and a frog is internal and external fertilization. The frog's external, the bird is internal fertilization. So fertilization occurs in the upper oviduct. As several hours later, as the egg starts developing and they're passing down through the oviduct, albumin or egg white is added from special glands. Further down the oviduct, the shell membrane, shell pigments are also secreted around the egg. Sperm remain alive in a female's oviduct for many days after a single mating. So an old chicken out here don't have to mate with a rooster every time she goes and lays an egg to get that egg fertile. She can mate with a rooster and literally lay an entire clutch of eggs, which could be 8, could be 10, could be 15. And all of those would show fertility. So it's amazing how long the sperm do remain alive in the female bird. Hen eggs show good fertility for 5 or 6 days after mating, but then fertility drops rapidly. However, an egg occasionally can be fertile as long as 30 days after separation of hens from roosters. Now that's pretty astonishing. I think you'll see more of that out in the wild. Usually in domestic fowl, there's plenty of males around to maintain fertility. So instinctively, they would mate more often to maintain fertility. Out in the wild, it may not be as often that the female runs across a male. Now in wild turkeys, the male establishes territory. All the hens in that territory would be considered basically his harem. And he would mate with all those hens, although once he mates with a hen, that hen may move out of his territory to establish her nest. Depends on where she wants to go nest. Most likely it'll be somewhere in the territory, but she could go far outside of that territory. What if she goes out there and lays 6 eggs? And then an old possum finds the eggs and finds him a good fat meal and eats them. You think she's coming back to that nest? No, she's probably gonna go find another one because she's not finished. She goes creates another nest, and it may have taken her 8 or 10 days to lay those 6 eggs. Now in the next nest, she's gonna lay, let's say she lays 8 eggs, which may take her 10 to 12 or 13 more days to lay those other 8 eggs, and now she's gonna sit on those 8 eggs. Her original clutch could have been as many as 14 or 15 eggs, but now she's been cut in half because something destroyed it. Are those eggs fertile? Absolutely. Instinctively, if the female does not think her eggs are fertile, she will then seek out another male. And that's why in wild turkeys, that's why they gobble. They gobble to tell the females where they're at. We as hunters, Tanner, you like to hunt turkeys? I can tell wears camouflage all the time. He's already got a beard growing for spring season. Here we are as hunters out here, and what do we try to do? We try to mimic a hen to call the tom in. That's all against nature. Nature is the tom gobbling and strutting and calling the hens in. So if they don't come in, it's because they're sticking to nature. Now some of them just can't stand it anymore. The teasing is just too much. So they got to come see just how pretty she is because man, she sounds good. So that's when they make their mistake. So it's against nature for the tom to come in to the calling of a hen. It's much more common for the tom to establish they love strutting areas. They'll find an area and they'll just stay in that area all morning. They'll strut and they'll gobble and you couldn't pry them away with a bar as long as hens come through. When the hens go off to the nest, then they get a little concerned, don't they, Tanner? That's when you can really talk to them. If you hit the right sexy note, here they come. And I'll tell you what makes them mad too. You get, you finally make it to their strutting area in which they have left now because the hens have all went to their nest and now they're lonely. They've had hens with them all morning, but now they're lonely. So the last hen that they recall leaving, they kind of head in that direction. And they may have shut up a little bit now. They're not gobbling as much. Get back in that strutting area. If he's within distance, gobble like another tom and see how he likes that in a strutting area. We're fixing to be a fight. It's like somebody walking through your living room. We're fixing to throw down. Here he comes. And he's not after a hen, he's after a fight. So you better hit him or he may take your eyeball out. You better get him with the first shot. He's coming after you. Mating systems. This has got to be my favorite part of this whole deal. These systems that birds come up with, and some of them's pretty standard. You have monogamy, and let me explain bird monogamy. That just didn't even sound right, did it? Bird monogamy. Bird monogamy typically is an annual monogamy, simply because the livelihood of birds is not guaranteed very long. The smaller the bird, the more annual monogamy. Now, when you get into lifetime monogamy in birds, which there are some, there's albatrosses, there's geese, there's swans that lifetime mates. They're always a larger bird because they have longer livelihood. But those birds may not spend the entire year together. They simply show back up to the breeding grounds the next year, and sometimes the exact same nesting site the next year to find their mate back there ready to go again. That's what maintains a strong marriage. They don't have to live the whole year together. They're glad to see each other when they come home. It's like, how was your year? Oh, it was great, honey. It's good to see you. Spent the whole year together. They've been divorced 3 times. So birds got it figured out. We can learn a lot from birds. So that's kind of monogamy. And a lot of the birds that have monogamy really require monogamy. And the reason they require it is to help raise the young. It typically would take 2 in their cases. For instance, a bird of prey, an eagle. Eagles tend to mate for long periods of time. The eagle is born naked and helpless. So if he's born naked and helpless, who's going to feed him? Obviously, the parents have to feed. You think one parent can keep enough food coming for 3 or 4 chicks in the nest? It's a constant battle for them to feed themselves and the chicks in the nest. So monogamy is probably the #1 means of bird reproduction, or in this case, a mating system for birds. Number 2 is polygamy, where which an individual has only one mate, that's monogamy. And polygamy, an individual has more than one mate during a breeding period. This would be the wild turkey. He's established a territory. He has 10 hens in his territory, and they're his. That's his harem. So he mates with several of them. Therefore, his genetics, being a dominant bird, because he's beat up the rest of them, he's established a territory, he's the survival of the fittest, and it's his genetics that the species wants to be passed on anyway. So not the weaker element out here that's already been beat up and maybe starved to death, or could be coyote bait, who knows? But we don't want those genetics moved on. So that's polygamy. Now, it says that although most birds have a monogamous mating system, this is on 610, either member of a pair may also mate with an individual that is not the partner. And what it goes on to basically say, and they did DNA analysis on chick offspring, and what they found that even in monogamous species of birds, even birds can be unfaithful. That's sad, isn't it? It's just in the sinful nature of birds. But even birds can be, and they say that birds are frequently unfaithful. Well, as we'll see in the last mating system here as we get to it, that there are some birds have figured out a way to put a stop to that, because they don't take to that very kindly. The next one is polygamy. And polygamy to me is very, very, very similar to polygamy. The most common form of polygamy in birds is polygamy, where one male has many females. And they use an example of grouse during the breeding season will gather in a display area called a lek. And this display area may contain several males, but the males in this area have established small territories. Yet they're within sight of each other, but they've established small territories. Now, if it's prairie chickens, they usually like to use the side of a hill because they make a lot of noise, and they want that noise. They use a booming noise, and they use that noise to attract females. Once females get close, then they've got the beautiful feathers, and boy, they fluff it up, and they really put on a show. And once they get them there, then the males are trying to talk the females into which one they should be mating with. So it's a con game, I guess, that's going on. But she ultimately makes the decision. So several females may fly into the lek, and here's this one strutting his stuff and talking his game. Here's this one strutting his stuff and giving her some one-liners, of course, I'm sure. And they're going down through the lek, and they're picking and choosing which one. Well, they're going to choose what they consider the most dominant. Now, I can see these 2 females walking along, and this one says, hey man, this one's pretty good looking. And the other one looks at her and says, I made him last year, his kids are stupid. So they're giving each other advice. So let's try some different genetics. We want a little longevity here to the kids. Mine flew into a tree, they're dead. So, there's probably some communication going on, but the females ultimately choose. Now this is polygamy. The last one is my favorite. This one just kills me. Polyandry. Polyandry. What we have here now, we've turned the tables. We have a female that establishes territory. And she's one mean female. She establishes territory, she goes find her a mate, and I think she still chews him. I think she drags him in by the hair of his head and says, listen, buddy, you're gonna mate with me whether you want to or not. I'm gonna lay some eggs over here in the corner of my little territory, and you're gonna get your butt on them, and you're gonna sit on them until they hatch, and then you're gonna raise them, and I'll check on you from time to time, and you better be doing what you're supposed to do. And she struts her stuff to the other side of the little territory, and she finds her another one, and she mates with another one that gives him the same what for. She may have several in her territory. Now, we have other names for females like that. In birds, it's polyandry, okay? So we'll keep it polyandry. Let's just say, for instance, she goes to check up on old Joe. She's got Joe cornered down here, and he's sitting on his 5 or 6 eggs, and she feels like she's got Joe whipped in line. She gets over there, and she finds Joe is not on the nest. Oh, let's just say her feathers are ruffled. So Joe's not on the nest. She finds Joe, and as she approaches Joe, she noticed some movement. Joe found another woman. I'm sure she was nicer. He found another woman. That did not make her happy at all. She's not gonna put up with this. So she drags Joe back into the territory. I'm sure he was just barely out of it. Probably had one toe across the line, and he lost the other toes. Drags him back in, takes him over the nest, kills all the eggs in the nest, just destroys them, builds another nest, lays some more eggs over a small time frame there, and tells Joe that better not happen again. And now he's punished to sit even longer. But what she made sure of is that the other hen did not come in and lay in her nest, so Joe wouldn't be hatching another woman's egg. See what I'm saying? She's got it figured out. If anything goes wrong, my fault, your fault, nobody's fault. That's a quote off Big Jake. You recognized it, didn't you? I'm gonna kill you. That's what she says. My fault, your fault, nobody's fault. You gotta love polyamory. The birds have it figured out, I'm telling you. Nesting and care of the young. Most duties of incubation fall on the female. Imagine that. Does that change among species? Not really. Would you say that most duties of rearing the young falls upon human females? You would stand on that forever, wouldn't you? Not only did you have to carry them around for 9 months and then birth them, but now you got to take care of them. And the father, who's just another child. They don't grow up either. There are a lot of instances, though, that both parents play a huge role in this. Let's take quail, for instance. Quail, which we don't have many of around here, that's probably because the fathers quit showing up for duty. If a female quail, yes, this is a monogamous situation, an annual monogamy, mates with a male, and she lays a clutch of eggs, and she's sitting on this clutch of eggs, and she sits there for a while. Well, after a while, you'll get thirsty and hungry. So she leaves the nest to go get something to eat, usually not gone very long. But typically in quail, if she leaves, the male gets on. He'll sit on the nest till she comes back. When she comes back, give her a little relief, and she gets back on the nest. If, for instance, something happens to her and she never shows up, he'll stay with them. He'll hatch them, and he'll raise them. And that may be the reason we don't have many quail anymore. I'm not going to go sit on those eggs. Who knows? But that's kind of what they're leaning here, is that there are several species that require both. Now, if both survive and we get the eggs hatched, and typically both help raise those young. It's not as necessary in these type of birds. And when I say these type, these are called precocial birds, which is on the next page, 611. You have precocial and altricial. Precocial birds produce offspring that when they hatch from the egg, they have a kind of a down feathering to them. And when that feathering dries and becomes real cute puffy down that's on them, then they can really commence to functioning with the parents and can follow the parents away from the nest, whether it be a duck or a goose or a quail, And the parents can just show them food, and then they consume food on their own. So the parents don't have to go get food and bring it back, go get food and bring it back, like in the majority of birds. So all precocial birds are birds that we're real familiar with. That'd be birds that we tend to hunt, whether it be turkey or quail or ptarmigan or geese or ducks. Those fit the precocial category. Altricial is the category in which the birds are hatched naked and helpless. And they're in a nest, they're naked and helpless, and typically these nests are not ground bearing, but some of them are. A field lark would fit that category. And the parents have to bring food back to them. And that requires more of a biparental situation than the precocial, simply because they're working their butt off to bring food into the offspring. So that's altricial. You have one other situation here. Another situation is what's called parasitic birds. And these birds really don't want to do anything. The instinct tells them that they need to reproduce, but they really don't want the responsibility. They're kind of free birds, if you will. The American cowbird is probably the number one nest parasite, nesting parasitic bird, if you will. What it likes to do, when it comes time to reproduce, this bird seeks out another bird's nest. Take, for instance, a bluebird. It's got a little nest over here in a little hollow in a fence post, and bluebird sits in and out all the time, and she's laid 3 eggs in there, and she's gone to pick up some insects and just to get out for a while. Comes back to the nest, and there's 4 eggs in the nest. The old cowbird slipped in, laid an egg, and got the Sam Hill out of there. Okay? So now the bluebird comes back and says, well, I really thought I was gonna, I guess I just didn't remember laying that 4th egg, but that 4 eggs is about all I can sit on and hatch. You know, instinct's kind of controlling this situation. So the bluebird commences the sitting on the eggs, hatches the eggs, only to hatch 3 bluebirds and 1 cowbird. So we got the ugly duckling situation, in which, man, that's the ugliest kid I've ever raised. But I'll raise it anyway, because only the loving mother can love a kid this ugly, right? So she raises it up, and being the bad child that it is, it flies the coop, so to speak, as soon as it can, and becomes the dreaded cowbird that it always was. Yep. It's awful. But those are parasitic birds, and this has actually become really bad. In the state of Texas, parasitic cowbirds became so bad, it almost caused extinction of many songbirds in the state of Texas. Even to the extent, I don't know who noted this, but the government hired a professional trapper to minimize birds' parasitism. And his job was to trap, and in a lot of cases, kill and destroy the parasitic bird. And it was the brown-headed cowbird, what it was. And so, killing several, he also trapped several hundred, maybe thousands, and transplanted them to another part of the United States. Guess where they transplanted them? Oklahoma. Yeah. I think he was looking ahead to how bad we was going to beat them last Saturday. He's still mad about that football game. Needless to say, Oklahoma has their share of cowbirds, but what was happening is a bluebird would establish a nest, might get 1 egg laid, and before she knew it, there was 5 eggs in the nest, because there's so many female cowbirds looking for nests to parasitize. Boom, they'd all come in and lay an egg, and before you know it, she was hatching 4 cowbirds and 1 bluebird. Well, that parasitism over time dropped the number of songbirds, which is the nest that they parasitize, to the point we didn't see many. All we saw was brown-headed cowbirds everywhere. So we got them in Oklahoma now, thank you for the Texans. Those dang Texans continuing. All right, bird populations and their conservation. Bird populations roll with food populations. If the snowy owl's primary food source is the snowshoe hare, and if the snowshoe hare runs 4 years of cycle of abundance, like every 4th year they peak out and they start falling off again, guess what rolls right behind them? the abundance of snowy owls, right? So it honestly just follows the food source. Remember the question we had in lab? It was lab 15, one of them you have right there in front of you. And it asked, is a predator-prey question. And one of the answers was, predators will eat up to a certain point and save some for later. You remember that one? That's not the answer you put, is it? Because if it is, that would be incorrect.
I don't know.
What do you have for number 11 as the answer?
Probably that one. Well, I don't even know what you just said. I just saw predators.
Just kill me. Well, the correct answer would be that the life cycles run in an oscillating cycle. I believe what it ended up saying, oscillating something on that correct answer. Is that what you put?
Yeah.
It will be now, I guess. And it's because predators don't consume for a while, say, well, we'll save some for next year, because they need to eat. But all these, it's up and down. And that's exactly what follows with populations and conservation here. Now, there's a lot of species that are influenced by human populations, and there's several species that I think they thrive off of it. Sparrows and starlings. Humans don't bother them, they'll nest on your front porch. It doesn't matter. If you have a boot you hadn't worn in a while, there's probably a wren nest in it. But they thrive quite well on stuff like that. So, but a lot of the domestic fowl that we hunt, we tend to have lessened the numbers by some of our maybe farming practices, things like that. If you spray using insecticides or use pesticides or use herbicides, you kill weeds, weeds recover, and weed seeds are feed. So you can reduce that way. And some of the other things have said they've lessened shell strength where the shells don't hold up, therefore they don't hatch, and you lessen your offspring numbers there as well. Some of the problem today, though, is habitat destruction, which getting rid of weeds would be habitat destruction, but they're talking about migratory birds that may fly from here to, let's say, the tropical rainforest. In fact, they say that the amount of tropical rainforest that's being destroyed today is equivalent to the size of the state of Washington. Now, that's being destroyed on an annual basis. Enough forest equivalent to the size of the state of Washington and the rainforest is being destroyed on an annual basis, depriving some over 35 species of birds their wintering homes, not having a place to go. The species does not thrive and survive very well. So that in itself would definitely play a role. They talk about game bird hunting. Now, at one time there was no laws. We knew which ones we liked to eat, so we got hungry, we went and killed one of them, regardless of time of the year, whatever. Well, game bird hunting is a well-managed, renewable resource in the U.S. and Canada. And while hunters kill millions of game birds each year, none of the bird species, and here's the key term, none of the game bird species legally hunted. See, that's a term we don't understand very well in Florida County or eastern Oklahoma. None of them are endangered. And that's because of the regulations and the laws. You can only kill so many a day. You can only hunt certain times of the year. You don't want to go find 2 quail in the springtime and kill them both. What are they doing? They're nesting. They're mating. They're nesting. You just killed 14 eggs sitting in that nest. Wait till they're hatched, and then when they're in coveys in the fall of the year, then you can kill some of them, but never kill the entire covey. And be a sport about it. Don't see them running across the ground and go boom, boom, and kill them all with 2 shots. That's one we don't have. That's illegal. That's against the law. So it's called pot shooting. That's why we don't have a lot of these birds today. It says humans are responsible for the extinction of many bird species. More than 140 species of birds since 1681 have followed the last dodo to extinction. That'd be horrible to follow the last dodo to extinction. Now you'll find this interesting too. In the state of Wisconsin, they collared some house cats. They put some radio collars on these house cats, and they followed these cats around and documented how many songbirds that this handful of cats they collared was eating, okay? And they calculated that. They calculated the cat density in the state of Wisconsin and multiplied it out. And this is what they come up with. In the state of Wisconsin, researchers estimated that in that state alone, cats may kill 19 million songbirds in a single year. That's some serious mathematical equations right there. 19, that's in one state. All I can say is that state's got way too many kitty cats. I say we call her something else to see how many kitty cats we can get rid of at least. Cats have their place, but. And the next paragraph simply talks about the state of Washington, 170,000 square kilometers each year being destroyed, size of the state of Washington, depriving some 250 species of songbird migrants. So that kind of finishes up the old bird chapter. And you can look through several orders. Some of these orders are very difficult to actually pronounce, but one order I want to mention on page 615. It's called Order Passeriformes. Notice that these are the perching songbirds. A lot of the birds you're familiar with would fit this category. A blue jay would fit this category. Sparrow, finches, thrushes, mockingbirds, meadowlarks, swallows, magpies, starlings, crows, jays. I mean, the list is huge. 56 families, 60% of all birds fit in that order alone. And that entire order would also fit what we was talking about earlier, the naked and helpless, which is back on 611, altricial. They're hatched, naked, and helpless. So that finishes chapter 27. Chapter 28 starts on mammals, which that's all we like is this chapter getting to test 4. So what's today? Tuesday. We don't have class Thursday, correct? So we come back next Tuesday. I'm going to get just a little bit started on this chapter today, not a whole lot. So we come back Tuesday to possibly finish the chapter with review and to have that test next Thursday, test 4 next Thursday. That would be the earliest. It very well could be, we like tests on Thursdays, but it could end up on a Tuesday if we had to, okay? So let's start with some of the introductory to the mammal. What makes a mammal a mammal? Every one of these cats, we decided feathers made a bird, right? What makes a mammal a mammal? What are some distinguishing characteristics? Skin? Fur?
Hair.
Some are definitely hairier than others, would you agree? Is a whale a mammal?
Yeah.
How hairy are whales?
I never.
Just a few whiskers at most.
Still hair though.
That's exactly right, and that's what they say. What would you think, what's the primary thing that they get their name from?
Their boobs.
Mammary glands would be a more proper terminology. Yeah, mammals get their name from production of milk, which comes from mammary glands. And we'll see in this chapter, there's about 3 different kind of categories here. There's actually mammals that lay eggs, and but they produce milk, so they still fit in the mammal category. The duck-billed platypus lays an egg, the offspring's hatched from the egg, then it nurses milk produced by the mother, but the milk produces, or the mother produces the milk in a depression on the stomach, and the young lap it up like a dog.
Are they poisonous?
They do have some spines on the back legs, and there's poison in those, yes. That's how they kill a lot of their prey to consume, but fish is a lot of their prey. But the duck-billed platypus and spiny anteater is one of those. Another one is the kangaroo or the marsupials. So who's got that one? Who's doing the marsupials? Well, what's really unique about the marsupials, if you see, we've got we don't have teats producing milk. We have it being produced by a gland in a depression on the duck-billed platypus and spiny anteater. Then we go to the marsupials, which give birth to very immature young. It's like a 100-cell stage. They're embryonic, they're naked, blind, and helpless, not much bigger than any of your thumb when they're born. And when they're born, they have to know to crawl up the fur of the mother's belly and crawl over into the pouch of the marsupial. And if it makes it that far, then it establishes itself on the mother's milk. Now, where the marsupials differ from us is that we produce milk, they produce specialized milk. We spend a lot of time in gestation, they spend very little time in gestation. Okay, it's about, I think their gestation is 33 days from becoming pregnant to giving birth. Ours is just a tick longer than that, don't you think? More like 280 days. If it's 38 to 40 weeks, I believe it is, if you get it in weeks. So this little one crawls over in the pouch, it survived, it hooks up to mom's milk, and mom's feeding it a high-fat diet. Mom immediately gets pregnant again. Now these, like a red kangaroo, they literally spend their entire life pregnant. But it'll reach a certain cell stage in embryonic development, and it'll just stop. It'll just sit there in the uterus. There's actually no placental attachment in these red kangaroos, but it'll sit in the uterus, won't die, won't grow, nothing, until the one in the pouch is big enough to get out. When the one in the pouch is big enough to get out, it still comes back to mom for milk, but now mom's feeding it a low-fat diet on one side. The other one starts growing, she gives birth to it, and it crawls in the pouch, and it's hooked up on high-fat diet milk. So specialization in the marsupials is in milk production. Specialization in the placentals, like us, we are in gestation. We think it's a lot easier to keep them in the oven than get them out. And to a certain point, those of you that have children would agree, to a certain point, it's time for them to get out, right? And then misery comes again. So you can see the different specialties here for sure in this particular class of mammals. But I think the mammary glands, where the name come from, we have body covered with hair. Mammary glands are probably your two most specific identifiers for this particular class, mammalian. 5,400 species as compared with more than 9,700 species of birds, so we're behind the birds. 28,000 species of fishes, and 1,100,000 species of insects. So we're on down the line of numbers, but notice where we're going up the food chain. Insects down here, we're up here, aren't we? The higher you go food chain, the numbers are going to be less, so it just simply makes sense. Mammals, among the most biologically differentiated groups in the animal kingdom, mammals are exceedingly diverse in size, shape, form, and function. And that's probably an understatement by the time we get finished with this. I like what the author says here at the bottom of that first column, right above origins and evolution. He says, because our welfare has been and continues to be closely related to that of other mammals, it is clearly in our interest to preserve the natural environment of which all mammals, ourselves included, are a part. We need to remember that nature can do without us, but humans cannot exist without nature. That put any pressure on you? It did Al Gore. He's gone green. This is killing him. He read this somewhere, and he's gone green. Of course, he's invested in everything he's promoted as well. All right, moving from there, let's look characteristics of class mammalia on 621. There is a box there. First thing they list in that box is the body covered with hair, right? What's the second thing? Integument with sweat, scent, sebaceous, and mammary glands. And then beyond that, it kind of breaks up into some different things, but those are top two right there. Look on 622. Structural and functional adaptations of mammals. Mammalian skin, especially as modifications distinguish mammals as a group. In general, skin is thicker in mammals than in other classes of vertebrates, although, as in all vertebrates, it's composed of epidermis and epidermis. So you have two basic layers, and areas of abuse will be thicker. I mean, that's just the way nature makes us. Bottom of your feet's much thicker skin than the side of your leg, because it's just areas of abuse. Different types of hair, and we've got all kinds of hair going on here. And some have different kinds of hair on the same animal, just for different purposes. It says humans not considered one of the hairiest ones in mammals, although humans have a lot of hair considerably, but they pull whales out. Whale hair is reduced to only a few sensory bristles on the snout. It doesn't get any fewer than that. That's the low end of the category, although probably the largest mammal fits here. Hair grows continuously. Hair itself is a dead structure. It's growing out of a live system, but in itself it's a dead structure filled with a protein called keratin. We're all familiar with humans shedding hair all the time, right? We don't ever clog up any sinks or anything, do we? What about other animals? They shed hair on a constant basis? That's a little difference between humans. They may shed it in the springtime, getting ready for summer, and then grow it back to get ready for winter. Not us. We just shed it all the time. Doesn't matter. Winter, spring, summer, doesn't matter. So, true hair found only in mammals is composed of dead keratin-packed epidermal cells. So the hair itself is dead. Two kinds of hair forming the pelage. Underhair, dense and soft underhair for insulation. You do not see that on humans. And then longer guard hair. They're using an example of a beaver here. The beaver can swim through 35-degree water that would freeze us to death. Because he has the kind of hair he has the guard hair that mats down over the insulative underhair. And when he comes out on the bank the other side, he just kind of flicks, and the guard hair flicks the water off the underhair, doesn't even get wet. It's an insulative layer. Now, we can't do that, we'd freeze to death. But we're smart enough to know that, so we don't join the Polar Bear Club and jump in ice cold water. That's stupid. Although there are some people that do that. When a hair reaches a certain length, it stops growing. In most mammals, there's periodic molts of the entire coat. We talked about that. Sometimes there's 3 or 4 molts throughout the year. Like in snowshoe hares, they'll molt, and their coat that grows back is camouflaged with the actual foliage of the plants of that time of the year. Survival mode is pretty cool. Hair is shed and replaced throughout life in humans, as we know. And in some cases, it's shed and not replaced. Got a few bald genetics in here. So, the simplest cases, foxes, seals, the coat is shed once every year. Mammals have 2 annual molts, one in the spring and one in the fall. The snowshoe hare, here it is, has 3 annual molts. The white winter coat is replaced by a brown gray summer coat, replaced by an autumn grayer coat. It's all creating camouflage for survival. Hair of a mammal has become modified to serve many purposes. You have bristles of hogs, spines of porcupines and their kin, vibrissae of the snouts of most mammals are examples. And those are just whiskers, basically, that provide a sense of touch or sensory touch. You know, a mole would fit that category. Porcupines and hedgehogs, they list those as well. Those are definitely unique forms of hair. Porcupine quill. Horns and antlers. That's a good place to start up right there when we come back next week. We'll look at